Let's start preparing the statement. We call the statement showing liability of the underwriters. Liability of the underwriters. Okay, you have the particulars here, and the underwriters are three. You have A, B, and C. Okay, like we did in the last problem, we start with gross liability. That's what we are doing here. We are starting with gross liability to see first initially how much they have to take up. So A has taken responsibility for 10,000, B has taken responsibility for 6,000, and C has taken responsibility for 4,000 shares. Okay, total is 20,000. That means if nobody buys any of the shares, A will have to take up the entire 10,000, B will have to take up 6,000, and C will have to take up 4,000. If nobody buys, but people have bought the shares, and next we minus is the less marked applications. Less marked application. They have already given us the marked applications. Shares of which marked applications were as follows: A, it is 8,000. B, it is 2,850, and C, it is 4,150. Okay. If we minus this, what's the meaning of this? A initially had a liability of 10,000. Now, since he has received certain applications in his favor, or certain applications have been purchased through him, his liability now has come down to 10,000 minus 8,000. 8,000 has already been taken up by the investing public. His liability has come down to 2,000. In case of B, the liability has come down to 3,150. Okay, now see, now something else happens here. The liability of C initially was 4,000. Okay, but he has received a surplus in his favor. That means even at the end, C won't have to take up anything because he has already done his liability is already done because he has received 4,150. That means additional. Okay, so he has received a surplus, and that's why I'm going to put it in brackets. His liability was 4,000, but applications that have come through him are 4,150. That means 150 are surplus, 150 extra. Now, what do we do with the surplus? We will see a little later. We will see a little later. Okay. Next, I minus out of the marked applications. Now, what happens here is total applications received. Total applications received is equal to 16,000. Now, out of the 16,000, we have marked applications. Okay, now mark, if you add this, how much you get? 8,000 plus 2,850. 8,000 plus 2,850 plus 4,150. It comes to 8,000, 10,000, 11,000, 15,000. That means out of 16,000 of the applications that we received, 15,000 are marked applications. These are all the marked applications. Okay, that means the remaining 1,000, 16,000 minus 15,000 will be 1,000 will be your unmarked. This will be the unmarked applications. That means these are applications that the company has received directly, not through any underwriter. Okay, so 16,000 applications were received from the public, out of which 15,000 are marked. How did I get this 15,000? You add all the marked together. Okay, so 16 minus 15, 1,000. What are these 1,000? These are also received from the public, but these are unmarked applications. Unmarked applications are those that do not bear any stamp of the underwriter but are received directly from the public. In the previous problem, in problem 1, unmarked applications were given to us. They mentioned the number. We didn't have to calculate it. But here we are calculating it. And how you calculate it? The total applications that you receive minus the marked applications, you get the unmarked applications. These are the marked applications. These are all the marked applications. Okay, these are the marked applications. So total applications minus marked applications, you get unmarked applications. Now, these unmarked applications also have to be divided. See, what we are doing here, we started with the gross liability. Look at the small note that I put. We started with the gross liability. This is just an elaborate version of it based on each underwriter. Then we are minusing the total applications. Right now, what we have minused here are the marked applications. We also have to minus the unmarked because it's 16,000. What we have minused here is only 15. We still have to minus this 1. Now, how do we minus the unmarked application? Less unmarked applications. Okay, unmarked applications, that is 1000 is minus always in the ratio of gross liability. Okay, always in the ratio of gross liability. That means in this ratio, this 1000 has to be divided. Now, if you take this ratio here, I hope all of you know to calculate ratios. 10,000 is to 6,000 is to 4,000. Cancel the 3 zeros. I'm just doing this for people who may not be very familiar in calculating this. Many of you may also know it already. Okay, cancel this 3 zeros and then you're left with 2 5s are 10, 2 2 3s are 6 and 2 2s are 4. 2 2s are 4. So 5 is to 3 is to 2. That's how you calculate this ratio. Okay, 5 is to 3 is to 2. So this is going to be divided in that ratio. 5 is to 3 is to 2. Okay, so we are going to get, if we divide that, you'll get 500, 300 and 200. So basically, A's liability after minusing the marked applications had come down to 2000. Now it's come down to 2000 minus 500. It's come down to 1500. It's come down to 1500. Okay. B's has come down to from 3150 minus 300 unmarked applications which have been divided in his favor. That has come down to 2850. 2850. And C, he already had a surplus. Okay, now please look at C's case. He already had a surplus, plus he has an additional surplus, 200 extra, which he does not need. So his surplus goes up to 300. Why I call it surplus? Because his liability is already done. His initial liability was 4,000, but he received 4150 in his favor. So 150 extra. Now he's received 200 more. So basically, 150 plus 200, 350 extra. How did I get 350? 150 plus 200. Okay, so this is a surplus. He already had a surplus of 150 plus 200 more. It comes to 350. Now, before we find out the final answer, what we do is now we have to do this, what we do with the surplus of C. We have minus everything. If you check here, what we were supposed to minus 16,000, we have already minus 16. Marked plus unmarked. 15,000 plus 1,000 is already minus. Okay. So now how do we divide this 4,000? Now, before we go to that, we need to divide this surplus. So what I'm going to say is less surplus of C to be allocated between A and B in the ratio of gross liability. Surplus of C to be allocated between A and B in the ratio of gross liability. That means I'm going to divide this 350, which is extra for C, between these two. And in the ratio of gross liability, that is what's the ratio? 5 is to 3. Okay, so 5, the ratio is basically 5 is to 3. The ratio between A and B is what? 5 is to 3. Okay, so 350 divided in the ratio of 5 is to 3, you will get it as 219, and here you will get it as 131. How did I get this? 350 into 5 divided by 8, 350 into 3 divided by 8. If you check, you can just do that calculation and check. 350 into 5 divide by 8. You get it as 218.75. So I've rounded up to 219. Okay, and the other one you get as 350 into 3 divided by 8. You get it as 131.25. So it remains as 131. Whatever it is, this total has to come to 350, and it does come to 350. So basically, if you have given 219 here, 131, since this is like a minus, we try to make this plus so that we have a 0 at the end. We have a 0 at the end. Okay, 350, this gets evened out, this gets cancelled out. So that means 1,500 was the liability. Okay, out of that he has received 219, which is the surplus of C. So this comes down to 1281, and this comes down to 2850131. That comes down minus 131 comes down to 2719. Now, if you put this together, 1281 plus 2719, you will get 4,000. You can check it out. 1281 plus 2719, you will get 4,000. That means in this whole agreement, C does not have to take up anything. The shares, this remaining 4,000 which nobody has bought, A has to take up 1281 and B has to take up 271. Okay, so what we have done, this is just a kind of a working, What we show in this statement is a more elaborate version of this. So we start with the gross liability, this 20,000. Then you minus the applications. We segregate them as marked and unmarked. The 16,000, which is your mark, we first minus the mark, then minus the unmarked. In case there's any surplus, you divide the surplus between the remaining underwriters, and then you get the answer. So we call this liability as per agreement. What's the meaning of agreement? The agreement was made that in case the public do not subscribe to the shares, whatever remains the underwriters take. So C has to take up nothing, A has to take up 1,281 shares, and B has to take up 2,719 shares. Okay. Now remember one thing, whenever you get a surplus like this, don't allocate the surplus immediately. Wait to minus everything, and then towards the end only you allocate the surplus. That means you minus your mark, minus the unmarked, and then only allocate the surplus. That's why I didn't allocate the surplus here. You minus everything and then you allocate the surplus. Is this clear? So this is the answer. Whatever, you can always start with this working, because at the end you can check your answer with this. Whatever remains has to be your final answer. That is what nobody has taken up. So sometimes it's not that all underwriters may take up. Here we didn't have C taking up anything. Any questions, students?